The morning alarm pierced through the dormitory like a blade, but Zara Chen had been awake for hours. She sat cross-legged on her narrow bunk, eyes closed, breathing steady. Around her, alien cadets groaned and stirred, their various forms of complaint filling the air in a dozen different languages and frequencies. "Look at the human freak," hissed Vex Tari, a snake-like seraphim whose scales shimmered with disdain. "Still doing her primitive meditation rituals?" Zara's eyes remained closed. She had learned long ago that responding only gave them more ammunition. The Galactic Military Academy on Nexus Prime was supposed to be the finest institution in known space, where the best and brightest from every species came to learn the art of war. What they didn't mention in the recruitment hollows was how much the other species despised humans. "Chen!" barked Instructor Korath, his forearms crossing as he entered the dormitory. The massive Krathen's exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. "You're on sanitation duty again. Seems your test scores weren't quite up to par." This was a lie, and everyone knew it. Zara had scored higher than 90% of her class on the tactical assessment, but somehow her scores always got adjusted when they reached the official records. She opened her eyes and nodded silently. "Yes, sir." The other cadets snickered as she rose and made her way to the cleaning supplies. This had become routine over her 3 years at the academy. Excellence punished, mediocrity from humans barely tolerated, and open mockery encouraged by the staff. As she scrubbed the floors of the mess hall, Zara listened to the conversations around her. The Volothan twins were discussing battle formations they'd learned from their warrior caste. A group of crystalline Nexari debated energy weapon modifications. Even the plant-like Verdani shared growing techniques that somehow translated into tactical advantages. But when Zara had suggested modifications to standard combat doctrine based on human historical warfare, she'd been laughed out of the strategy classroom. Primitive monkey tactics, Professor Ilinth had called them, while the class erupted in amusement. "Hey, Dirt Walker," called Thane Koros, a massive Volothan whose purple skin seemed to pulse with contained violence. "You missed a spot." He pointed to a perfectly clean section of floor, his tusks gleaming as he smiled. Zara looked up from her scrubbing, meeting his eyes without flinching. "I see it," she said quietly. "Good. Because humans need to learn their place in the galaxy, at the bottom, cleaning up after their betters." The mess hall fell silent. Even the serving drones seemed to pause in their mechanical routines. Zara slowly stood, the cleaning rag still in her hands. "And what place is that exactly?" she asked. Thane's smile widened. "Extinct would be a good start." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Several other cadets had stopped eating to watch the confrontation. Zara felt the familiar fire building in her chest, the same rage that had driven her ancestors to conquer their homeworld, despite being smaller and weaker than nearly every predator they faced. "Cadet Chen, return to your duties," Instructor Korath's voice cut through the tension. "Cadet Koros, finish your meal." Zara knelt back down and continued scrubbing. But something had changed in the room's dynamic. The other cadets sensed it too. The quiet human girl who took every insult and punishment without complaint had just shown the first crack in her armor. That evening, Zara sat in the Academy's library, one of the few places where she could find peace. The vast digital archives contained military histories from across the galaxy, and she devoured them all. Krathen siege warfare, Seraphim infiltration techniques, Volothan shock assault tactics, but her favorite section remained locked away in the restricted files. Human military history was classified at level 7, accessible only to senior officers and strategic command personnel. The official reason was cultural sensitivity, but Zara suspected the truth was far simpler. They were afraid. She'd managed to access fragments over the years through various means. Stories of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held back an army. Accounts of Stalingrad, where humans fought for every room, every floor, every inch. Records of Vietnam, where technological superiority meant nothing against determination and knowledge of terrain. But these were just pieces, fragments of a larger picture that the galaxy seemed determined to keep hidden. Studying again, Zara? She looked up to find Dr. Sarah Martinez approaching. The elderly human woman was one of only 3 human instructors at the academy, relegated to teaching basic xenobiology, while alien professors handled subjects like advanced tactics and strategic command. Dr. Martinez, Zara stood respectfully. I was just reading about the Hegemony War. Ah, the one where the mighty Krathan Empire steamrolled 17 systems in 3 months. Dr. Martinez sat down beside her. Fascinating how they always seem to leave out certain details in those accounts. Zara raised an eyebrow. What details? Well, for instance, they never mention what happened when they reached the Terra system. Dr. Martinez pulled out a small data pad, her fingers dancing over the surface. Or why the war ended so abruptly after that. The data pad displayed a restricted file marked with clearance levels Zara had never seen before. Dr. Martinez glanced around the empty library and moved closer. What I'm about to show you never happened, understand? But I think it's time you learned why they really hate us. The file opened to reveal battle footage from 50 years ago. Zara watched in amazement as human ships, smaller and apparently outgunned, danced through space like deadly ballet dancers. They used tactics she'd never seen in any official military manual. Ships that should have been destroyed somehow survived impossible odds, not through superior technology, but through pure, relentless cunning. We didn't join the Galactic Union because we were ready, Dr. Martinez whispered. They invited us because they were terrified of what would happen if we remained independent. Humans have something that no other species possesses, Zara. Something that scares them more than any weapon. What's that? We're the only species that evolved from persistence hunters. Every other sapient race in the galaxy evolved from either prey animals or ambush predators. They think in terms of overwhelming force or hiding until the perfect moment to strike. But humans? Dr. Martinez smiled grimly. We evolved to chase our prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We never stop. We never quit. And most importantly, we get stronger as we get desperate. Zara stared at the footage as human Marines boarded a Krathan battleship. They moved with a fluid coordination she'd never seen in any of the Academy's training scenarios. Each soldier seemed to anticipate their comrades' actions without communication. Why don't they teach this? Zara asked. Because they've spent 50 years trying to breed it out of us. They separate human children from their parents as early as possible, put them in controlled environments, teach them to be ashamed of their heritage. They want humanity to become civilized, predictable, safe. The footage showed the final moments of the engagement. The Krathan ship, 10 times larger than the human vessel, exploded in a brilliant flash. But it wasn't destroyed by superior firepower. The humans had somehow turned the ship's own weapons against it. Your great-grandmother was on that ship, Dr. Martinez said quietly. Zara's head snapped up. What? Lieutenant Commander Elena Chen. She led the boarding party that took that battleship. The Krathan called her Chen the Relentless after that engagement. She never lost a single battle. Zara felt something shift inside her chest. All these years, she'd been told that humans were newcomers to galactic civilization, barely worthy of inclusion in the Union. But her great-grandmother had been a war hero? Why didn't anyone tell me? Because they made sure we forgot. They classified every human military achievement, every tactical innovation, every moment of brilliance. They wanted us to believe we were lucky to be here, grateful for their tolerance. Dr. Martinez closed the file and tucked the data pad away. But times are changing, Zara. War is coming whether the Union wants it or not. The Devourers have been spotted in 3 outer rim systems, and conventional tactics won't stop them. Zara had heard whispers about the Devourers, an extragalactic threat that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but dead rock behind. The Union's response had been to fortify the core worlds and abandon the outer colonies to their fate. What does this have to do with me? Because when the real war starts, they're going to need us. All of us. And they're going to remember why they were afraid of humanity in the first place. Dr. Martinez stood to leave. Your final examinations are next week. I suggest you stop holding back. As the elderly professor walked away, Zara sat in the empty library, her mind racing. Everything she'd been taught, everything she'd believed about humanity's place in the galaxy, had been a lie. They weren't weak newcomers grateful for acceptance. They were the descendants of warriors who had fought against impossible odds and won. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Commander Zelrath, the Academy's Seraphim headmaster, announced during assembly that the final examinations would be conducted differently this year. Instead of individual assessments, cadets would be formed into mixed-species squads and sent on actual patrol missions in the Outer Rim. Recent threats require practical experience, Commander Zelrath's voice carried clearly through the vast assembly hall. You will work in teams of 5, with species diversity being a key factor in squad composition. Zara felt her stomach drop as the squad assignments were announced. She'd been placed with Thane Koros, the Volathan who'd openly wished for human extinction. Vextari, the Seraphim, who never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of humanity's supposed inferiority. Clicta, a insectoid Vex whose rapid clicking language always sounded like mockery. And surprisingly, Mora Brightleaf, a Verdani whose plant-like appearance hid one of the sharpest tactical minds in their class. Squad Zeta 7 will patrol the Kepler sector, the commander continued. Intelligence suggests Devourer scout ships may be probing our defenses. Your mission is reconnaissance and early warning only. You are not to engage hostile forces under any circumstances. After dismissal, Squad Zeta 7 gathered in their assigned briefing room. Thane immediately took charge, his massive frame dominating the space. Listen up, insects, he growled, his tusks gleaming. I'm squad leader, which means you follow my orders without question. That includes you, human. Zara said nothing, but Mora's leaves rustled with what might have been amusement. The Volathan believes leadership comes from size and volume, the Verdani said in her melodic voice. How quaint. Thane's purple skin darkened with anger. Watch your tongue, plant. My people were conquering star systems when yours were still figuring out photosynthesis. And yet, Vextari interjected, her forked tongue flicking out to taste the air, it was the Seraphim who developed faster-than-light communication. Physical strength means little in modern warfare. Clicta's mandibles clicked rapidly, in what Zara had learned was the Vex equivalent of laughter. All of you think too small, she chittered. Individual achievement means nothing. Only the hive mentality ensures victory. Great, Zara muttered under her breath. A squad built on mutual contempt. This should end well. But as she looked around the room at her squad mates, she began to see something else. Each species represented a different evolutionary path, a different way of thinking about problems. The Volathan valued strength and direct action. The Seraphim prized cunning and patience. The Vex understood coordination and sacrifice. The Verdani thought in long-term cycles and saw patterns others missed. And humans were the wild cards nobody understood. Their transport ship, the UGS Meridian, departed for the Kepler sector 3 days later. It was a standard patrol vessel, armed with basic defensive systems and designed for extended reconnaissance missions. The crew was minimal, mostly automated systems, with a skeleton staff of junior officers. Zara stood in the observation deck, watching stars stream past as they traveled through hyperspace. The journey would take 4 days, plenty of time for her squad mates to find new ways to express their disdain for humanity. Having second thoughts, Dirtwalker? Thane's voice carried a note of cruel amusement. Zara turned to find him approaching, his heavy footsteps making the deck plates vibrate. About what? About pretending you belong out here. This isn't some academy simulation, human. Real combat, real death. Your primitive species isn't ready for this kind of warfare. Zara met his gaze steadily. And what makes you think the Volathan are? Thane's smile disappeared. My people have been warriors for 10,000 years. We've conquered entire sectors through strength and courage. What have humans ever accomplished besides barely surviving on their little mud ball? We survived, Zara said simply, against everything that tried to kill us, and we're still here. Something in her tone must have registered because Thane's expression shifted slightly. For just a moment, the contempt in his eyes was replaced by something else. Uncertainty. Survival isn't victory, he said finally. Isn't it? Zara turned back to the observation window. Ask the dinosaurs. As they dropped out of hyperspace into the Kepler sector, long-range sensors immediately detected anomalies. 3 outer rim colonies had gone silent in the past week, and debris fields suggested recent battles. This is worse than intelligence indicated, muttered Captain Torres, the human officer in charge of their mission. We're detecting energy signatures consistent with Devourer technology. Squad Zeta-7 gathered in the briefing room as new data streamed in. The colonies of Haven, New Carthage, and Prosperity had all been attacked within a 72-hour window. Each world had maintained defense fleets, veteran soldiers, and early warning systems. Each world had been completely destroyed. The pattern doesn't make sense, Mora observed, her photosynthetic patches glowing as she processed information. Devourer tactics typically involve overwhelming single targets. This suggests coordination and planning. Vexatari's scales rippled with unease. The reports speak of ships that appeared from nowhere, struck with impossible precision, then vanished. This contradicts everything we know about Devourer behavior. Klikta's clicking grew rapid and agitated. The hive mind should have anticipated such tactics. The fact that it did not suggests these are not typical Devourers. Thane slammed his fist on the table. Speculation serves no purpose. We need to find these creatures and destroy them. With what? Zara asked quietly. We're a reconnaissance vessel with minimal armament facing an enemy that destroyed 3 defended worlds in 3 days. The silence that followed was broken by Captain Torres's voice over the intercom. All hands to stations. We're detecting an energy signature approaching at high velocity. Unknown configuration, but it's big. The ship's lights dimmed as they went to combat alert. Through the observation windows, they could see it approaching. The Devourer ship was unlike anything in their databases. Instead of the organic flowing lines typical of their technology, this vessel was angular, purposeful, predatory. It's scanning us, reported the sensor operator. Raise shields, charge weapons, Captain Torres ordered. Sir, came the nervous reply, our shields won't even slow down whatever that thing is carrying. And our weapons... The pause spoke volumes. Zara felt something familiar stirring in her chest. The same feeling she'd had when facing Thane's taunts in the mess hall. The same fire that had driven her ancestors to face saber-toothed cats with nothing but sharpened sticks. Captain, she said over the intercom, request permission to speak. Not now, cadet. We're trying to figure out how to survive the next 10 minutes. The Devourer ship was closing fast. Its weapons were already charging, energy readings climbing beyond anything their defensive systems could handle. In less than 3 minutes, the UGS Meridian and everyone aboard would be nothing but expanding plasma. Unless someone did something impossible. Zara looked around at her squad mates. Thane was calculating combat vectors, his warrior instincts seeking a way to fight. Vextari was analyzing the enemy ship's configuration, looking for weaknesses. Klikta was running probability assessments, trying to find a survival scenario. Mora was correlating data, seeking patterns that might suggest escape routes. Each of them was brilliant in their own way. Each represented thousands of years of evolutionary adaptation. But none of them had evolved from persistence hunters. None of them had learned to survive by refusing to quit when all hope was gone. "I have an idea," Zara said. 4 alien faces turned toward her with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. "The human has an idea," Thane sneered. "Perfect. Now we can die with comedy." But Mora's leaves rustled thoughtfully. "What are you thinking, Zara?" Zara pulled up the tactical display, her fingers dancing over the controls as she overlaid shipping routes, gravitational data, and the Devourer ship's approach vector. "We can't fight it. We can't outrun it. But we might be able to outthink it." "Explain," Vexitari demanded. "Every species in the galaxy thinks in terms of overwhelming force or perfect ambush. But humans evolved differently. We learned to hunt by being unpredictable, by doing things that made no logical sense from the prey's perspective." She highlighted a section of space near the system's asteroid belt. "There's a mining operation here, abandoned for 6 months. If we alter course toward it, the Devourer will assume we're running for cover among the asteroids." "Which would be exactly what we'd be doing," Thane pointed out. "No." Zara's smile was razor thin. "We're not running for cover. We're running for ammunition." The ship shuddered as the first enemy pulse weapon found their range. Shields flickered and failed. They had perhaps 90 seconds before the next shot reduced them to constituent atoms. "Captain," Zara called over the intercom. "Trust me?" Captain Torres stared at the tactical display for exactly 3 seconds before making his decision. "All hands, brace for emergency maneuvers. Helm, follow Cadet Chen's navigation coordinates." The UGS Meridian banked hard toward the asteroid field, her engines straining against the gravitational forces. Behind them, the Devourer ship adjusted course with predatory patience, clearly confident in its ability to run down the smaller vessel. "Zara," Mora whispered, her photosynthetic patches flickering with stress patterns. "Please tell me you have more than hope powering this plan." Zara's fingers flew over the engineering console, accessing systems she technically wasn't qualified to operate. "The mining station uses gravitational anchors to position asteroids for extraction. If I can overload the gravitational generators at the right moment..." "You'll create a debris field," Vexitari finished, her tactical mind catching up. "But the Devourer ship's shields will deflect anything we throw at it." "Not if we're not throwing it at the ship." Zara pulled up the local star charts. "The mining operation is positioned near a gravitational anomaly, something the survey teams couldn't quite explain. If I'm right about what it is..." Thane's tusks gleamed as understanding dawned. "You're insane. Even if your theory is correct, the energy requirements alone would cook us from the inside out." "Better than being dissolved by Devourer weapons," Zara replied, not looking up from her calculations. The ship's proximity alarms screamed as they entered the asteroid field. Chunks of rock the size of battleships drifted in complex orbital patterns around the abandoned mining station. The structure itself was a masterpiece of engineering, its gravitational anchors keeping thousands of tons of valuable ore in perfect formation. "Devourer ship is maintaining pursuit," reported the sensor operator. "They're charging weapons for another shot." Zara's hands moved with inhuman speed across multiple control surfaces. Years of being denied proper training had forced her to become self-taught in every system aboard the ship. Now that knowledge might be the only thing standing between them and extinction. "Got it," she breathed, accessing the mining station's gravitational controls. "Klikta, I need you to coordinate with the ship's computer. When I give the signal, reroute all available power to the forward deflectors. The Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly as she interfaced directly with the ship's neural network. Accomplished. But Zara, this will leave us completely defenseless. We're already defenseless, Zara pointed out. Captain, I need you to maintain heading directly toward the gravitational anomaly. Don't deviate no matter what happens. Through the observation windows, they could see the Devourer ship closing the distance. Its weapons were cycling through charge sequences, building energy for a killing blow. They had perhaps 30 seconds. All squadmates, listen carefully, Zara said, her voice carrying a calm authority that surprised everyone, including herself. Each of your species brings something unique to this situation. Mora, your people think in long-term patterns. I need you to calculate the exact moment when the gravitational cascade will peak. The Verdani's entire body began glowing as she processed vast amounts of astronomical data. 14 seconds after initiation, accounting for relativistic effects and local gravitational variance. Vextari, your species specializes in precision strikes. When Mora gives the timing, I need you to target the mining station's primary gravitational anchor with everything we have. The Seraphim's eyes narrowed as she analyzed the target. The precision required is beyond normal tactical parameters. The margin for error is measured in microseconds. Can you do it? Yes. Thane, your people understand courage under fire. When this starts, we're going to be in the middle of a gravitational maelstrom. I need you to keep this ship stable through manual control while our computer systems are overloaded. The Volothan's expression had shifted from contempt to something approaching respect. You're asking me to pilot through forces that could tear us apart at the molecular level? I'm asking you to be what your people have always claimed to be, warriors. Thane's massive hands moved to the manual flight controls. Initiating manual override, for the glory of the Volothan Republic. Klikta, your people understand sacrifice for the greater good. I need you to maintain the computer interface even when the feedback starts burning through your neural pathways. Can you do that? The Vex's compound eyes fixed on Zara with something that might have been admiration. The hive endures. I will endure. 10 seconds to weapons range, reported the sensor operator. Zara's hand hovered over the mining station's control interface. Everything had to happen in perfect sequence. Too early, and they'd miss their window. Too late, and there would be nothing left of them to miss anything. Initiating gravitational overload, now. The mining station's massive gravitational anchors, designed to handle the delicate work of positioning asteroids, suddenly found themselves trying to contain forces meant for stellar engineering. The effects were immediate and catastrophic. Space itself seemed to ripple as gravitational waves propagated outward from the anomaly. Energy cascade building, Mora reported, her voice strained as she processed the incomprehensible forces at work. Peak intensity in 12 seconds. The Devourer ship, caught off guard by the sudden changes in local space-time, fired its charged weapons early. The energy beams, instead of striking the fleeing human vessel, were bent and twisted by the gravitational distortions. They curved back on themselves in impossible arcs. Weapons impact in 5 seconds, Vextari announced, her targeting systems locked onto the mining station's primary anchor. Thane fought the controls as gravitational shear tried to tear the ship apart. Hull stress at 90%. I can't hold this course much longer. Now! Mora shouted as the gravitational cascade reached its peak. Vextari fired every weapon the ship possessed at the primary gravitational anchor. The concentrated firepower, negligible against a Devourer ship, was more than sufficient to overload the mining station's delicate control systems. The results were spectacular. The gravitational anomaly, no longer contained by the station's sophisticated anchors, revealed its true nature. It wasn't just a gravitational distortion. It was a micro-black hole, artificially stabilized and used by the mining operation to compress ore into super-dense materials. When the containment failed, physics took over with a vengeance. The Devourer ship, caught between the expanding gravitational field and its own momentum, found itself trapped in an impossible situation. Its weapons, designed to overwhelm shields and armor, were useless against the fundamental forces of the universe. "The Devourer ship is being pulled into the anomaly," reported the sensor operator with barely concealed amazement. But Zara wasn't celebrating yet. The same forces affecting the enemy ship were trying to claim the UGS Meridian. Only Thane's skill at the manual controls and the precise timing of their escape vector kept them from following the Devourer into gravitational oblivion. "Hull stress at 105%, Klikta reported, her voice distorted by the neural feedback from maintaining the computer interface under impossible conditions. "We're exceeding design specifications." "Hold together," Zara whispered. Watching the tactical display as their ship threaded the needle between gravitational destruction and escape velocity. For 10 impossible seconds, they balanced on the edge of physics itself. Then, suddenly, they were clear. The gravitational effects faded to manageable levels, and normal space reasserted itself around them. Behind them, the Devourer ship was gone. Not destroyed in any conventional sense, but compressed beyond the event horizon of the micro-black hole, lost to a region of space-time where the normal rules no longer applied. "Status report," Captain Torres called out, his voice shaky but professional. "All systems functional," came the reply. "Minimal hull damage. No casualties." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. A single reconnaissance vessel, crewed by cadets and junior officers, had just destroyed a Devourer ship that could have devastated entire worlds. "How?" Thane asked, his usual bluster replaced by genuine curiosity. "How did you know that would work?" Zara leaned back in her chair, suddenly exhausted. "I didn't. Not completely. But humans have a saying, desperate times call for desperate measures. We evolved to do impossible things when survival was on the line." Vexatari's scales rippled with what might have been awe. "You used our own capabilities against us. The Volathan need to feel worthy through combat. The Seraphim require challenges that test our precision. The Vex seek opportunities to prove our dedication. The Verdani want to solve complex problems." "And you," Mora added quietly. "You somehow knew exactly how to motivate each of us to perform beyond our normal parameters." Before Zara could respond, the ship's communication systems crackled to life. Multiple signals were coming through from across the sector. Distress calls, status reports, and something else that made everyone on the bridge freeze. "UGS Meridian. This is Admiral Korthak of the Krathen Third Fleet. We monitored your engagement with the Devourer vessel." "How is this possible?" Captain Torres looked at Zara, then activated the communication system. "Admiral, this is Captain Torres of the UGS Meridian. Our tactical success was due to innovative thinking by one of our cadet squads." The silence from the other end stretched for nearly a minute before the Admiral responded. "Captain, you will proceed immediately to Nexus Prime Station. Your entire squad is to be debriefed by Strategic Command. This is Priority Alpha Directive." As the communication ended, Zara felt the weight of what had just happened settling on her shoulders. They'd not only survived an encounter with the Devourers, they'd developed a tactic that could actually stop them. In a single engagement, everything had changed. "Zara," Mora said quietly, "I owe you an apology. We all do. I've spent 3 years assuming humans were inferior because you lacked the obvious advantages of other species. But you have something else, don't you? Something we never recognized." "What's that?" "You see patterns where others see chaos. You find opportunity where others see only defeat. And most importantly, you never give up." Thane's massive hand fell on Zara's shoulder with surprising gentleness. At the academy, I called you Dirt Walker as an insult, but after today, I think it means something different. You walk where others cannot go. You find paths where others see only walls. Vexitari nodded, her forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. The Seraphim have a word for warriors who achieve victory through cunning rather than force. Chatel. It means one who dances with death. I think you are Chatel, Zara Chen. Klikta's clicks had shifted to a completely different pattern, one Zara had never heard before. The hive recognizes exceptional adaptation. You are no longer human to us. You are hive friend. As the UGS Meridian set course for Nexus Prime, Zara stared out at the stars and wondered what awaited them. The Galactic Union had spent 50 years trying to make humanity ashamed of its heritage, trying to breed out the very traits that made them dangerous. But war was coming, whether the Union was ready or not, and they were about to discover that humanity's greatest weakness might actually be their greatest strength. The journey back to Nexus Prime took 6 days, during which time their story spread through the fleet communication networks. By the time they arrived, the UGS Meridian was being escorted by 3 battle cruisers and a full diplomatic contingent. Quite a reception, Captain Torres observed as they approached the massive space station. Zara watched the approaching docking bays with growing unease. Something felt wrong about the entire situation. Too much attention, too many important people suddenly interested in a routine patrol mission. Squad Zeta 7, report to briefing room Alpha upon docking, came the announcement. Full dress uniforms required. As they changed into their formal academy uniforms, Zara noticed her squad mates were acting differently around her. The casual contempt had been replaced by something she couldn't quite identify. Respect, maybe, or perhaps fear. Whatever happens in there, Thane said as they approached the briefing room, remember that we succeeded because we worked together, all of us. The briefing room was packed with high-ranking officials from across the Galactic Union. Admiral Korthak stood at the head of the table, his 4 arms crossed in what Zara had learned was the Krathan equivalent of deep thought. Beside him sat General Praxis of the Seraphim Strategic Command, her scales shimming with barely contained excitement. Squad Zeta 7, Admiral Korthak began, you have accomplished something remarkable. In a single engagement, you have proven that Devourer ships can be defeated using conventional vessels and unconventional tactics. Sir, Zara said carefully, we were fortunate that the circumstances aligned in our favor. General Praxis leaned forward. Cadet Chen, our analysis of the engagement suggests that luck had very little to do with your success. You identified and exploited multiple variables that our strategic computers had dismissed as irrelevant. Furthermore, added a voice from the back of the room, you demonstrated an understanding of mixed-species tactical coordination that exceeds anything we've seen from our advanced officer programs. Zara turned to see Dr. Martinez entering the briefing room, but she was no longer wearing the simple uniform of a xenobiology instructor. Her uniform bore the insignia of strategic intelligence with clearance levels that made several of the assembled admirals look nervous. Dr. Martinez? Zara said, confusion clear in her voice. I'm afraid I haven't been entirely honest with you, Zara. Dr. Sarah Martinez is my cover identity. My real name is Colonel Sarah Reeves, Strategic Intelligence Division, specializing in human military capabilities assessment. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Zara had been under observation, possibly for years. But why? The Galactic Union has spent decades trying to understand why humans seem to perform beyond expectations in combat situations, Colonel Reeves continued. Most alien species develop tactical thinking based on their evolutionary advantages, strength, speed, natural weapons, defensive capabilities, But humans evolved something different. She activated a holographic display showing brain scans from various species. Every other species shows predictable neural patterns when facing overwhelming odds, fight, flight, or freeze responses. But humans show something unique. When faced with impossible situations, human brains actually become more creative, more willing to attempt solutions that have never been tried before. Admiral Korthak's expression grew troubled. Colonel, are you suggesting that humans become more dangerous when they're desperate? I'm not suggesting it, Admiral. I'm stating it as established fact. And with the Devourer threat expanding beyond our ability to contain, desperation is exactly what we need, General Praxis spoke up. The engagement reports indicate that Cadet Chen was able to coordinate her squad to perform beyond their individual capabilities. How is this possible? Zara found herself at the center of attention from some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The weight of their expectations was almost crushing. I'm not sure I understand the question, sir. You made each species perform a task that required them to exceed their normal parameters, General Praxis explained. The Volathin typically rely on overwhelming force. You made him perform precision piloting under extreme stress. The Seraphim prefer careful planning. You made her execute split-second targeting decisions. The Vex operate through consensus. You made her act independently to save the group. The Verdani think in long-term cycles. You made her provide real-time tactical analysis. Colonel Reeves smiled grimly. She did something that every human military leader has done throughout history. She saw what each individual was capable of rather than what their species typically does. Humans don't think in terms of species limitations. We think in terms of individual potential. And this is why you've been watching us, Zara said, pieces falling into place. The Union has been preparing for the Devourer threat for 3 years, Admiral Korthak admitted. Every strategic simulation, every tactical analysis, every weapon system we've developed has proven inadequate. We've lost 17 outer rim systems and estimate complete collapse of our defensive lines within 6 months. Unless, General Praxis added, we can find a way to change the fundamental nature of how we fight. And the only species that has consistently demonstrated the ability to adapt combat doctrine in real time is humanity. Zara felt the weight of what they were asking settling on her shoulders. You want humans to lead the war effort. We want you to lead the war effort, Colonel Reeves corrected. Strategic Command has analyzed every engagement involving human personnel over the past 50 years. You consistently outperform every predictive model we have. And after yesterday's engagement, it's clear that you can not only innovate tactics on the fly, but inspire other species to perform beyond their perceived limitations. The briefing room erupted as every alien official began speaking at once. Some protesting the idea of human leadership, others demanding details about human tactical capabilities, still others asking how quickly such a program could be implemented. But Zara wasn't listening to any of them. She was thinking about her great-grandmother, Elena Chen the Relentless, who had fought impossible battles and never lost. She was thinking about her squad mates, who had overcome species prejudices to accomplish the impossible. Most of all, she was thinking about the thousands of worlds and billions of lives that hung in the balance. I'll do it, she said quietly. The room fell silent. But I have conditions, she continued, her voice growing stronger. First, human military history is declassified and made available to all Union forces. If we're going to fight this war, everyone needs to understand what humans are capable of. Admiral Korthak nodded slowly. Agreed. Second, mixed species squads become standard throughout the fleet, not just for special operations, but for every unit. The Devourers are unlike anything we've faced before. We need every advantage, every perspective, every capability working together. General Praxis exchanged glances with the other officials. This would require a complete restructuring of military doctrine. Then restructure it, Zara said simply, because the old doctrine is getting people killed. And third? Colonel Reeves asked. Zara looked around the room at the assembled leadership of the Galactic Union. These beings represented civilizations thousands of years older than humanity, technologies beyond human comprehension, and military traditions stretching back to before humans had discovered fire. But they were asking her to save them all. Third, we stop pretending that any single species has all the answers. The Devourers aren't just another enemy fleet to be outgunned or outmaneuvered. They're an existential threat that requires something the galaxy has never tried before. Which is unity. Real unity. Not the political alliance we have now, but actual cooperation between species that evolved to think in completely different ways. The Devourers are coming. And when they arrive in force, our only chance is to be something they've never encountered before. As the meeting broke up and the various officials began making plans for the largest military reorganization in galactic history, Zara stood alone at the observation window, watching ships arrive and depart from the massive station. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the galaxy, the Devourer fleets were gathering. Soon, the real war would begin. But for the first time since arriving at the academy, Zara Chen felt ready for what was coming. 6 months after the Kepler incident, Commander Zara Chen stood on the bridge of the UGS Prometheus, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for battle. The assembled armada stretched beyond the horizon of space itself, representing every species in the Union and incorporating tactical innovations that would have been considered impossible just months earlier. "Status report," she called out, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had become her trademark. "All battle groups report ready, Commander," replied Captain Vexistari, her former squadmate now serving as her tactical coordinator. The Seraphim's scales had shifted to the deep blue patterns that indicated complete focus. "Mixed species integration is at 97% efficiency." Zara nodded, studying the tactical displays that showed the disposition of their forces. Traditional fleet doctrine would have organized ships by species and capability. Human vessels providing reconnaissance, Krathan battleships forming the main battle line, Seraphim destroyers handling precision strikes, Vex swarm fighters providing overwhelming numbers, and Verdani support ships coordinating logistics. But Zara had thrown traditional doctrine out the airlock. Instead, every battle group contained ships from all species, with crews specifically chosen for their ability to think beyond their evolutionary programming. Human officers served on Krathan battleships, teaching their aggressive crews the art of tactical patience. Seraphim commanders learned direct assault techniques from Volathan warriors. Vex pilots shared hive-mind coordination protocols with individualistic human squadrons. The results had been remarkable, but untested in real combat. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Korthak," reported Lieutenant Thane, the massive Volathan having accepted a subordinate role with surprising grace. "The Devourer fleet has been detected at the edge of the Solaran system." The main display shifted to show long-range sensor data. The approaching enemy force was beyond anything they had imagined. Thousands of ships, some larger than space stations, moving in perfect formation toward the core worlds of the Union. "Estimated time to contact?" Zara asked. 47 hours at current approach speed," replied Commander Klikta from her position at the coordination console. The Vex's integration with the ship's computer systems had been enhanced with human-designed interfaces, allowing her to process information at unprecedented speeds. "Ma'am," called out Dr. Mora from the science station, her Verdani physiology glowing as she analyzed the sensor data. "The Devourer formation is unlike anything in our database. They're not advancing in a standard assault pattern." Zara studied the tactical projection. The enemy ships were arranged in a complex three-dimensional matrix that seemed to shift and flow like a living organism. "What's your assessment?" "They're learning," Mora said quietly. The Devourers have adapted their tactics based on our previous engagements. They know we can exploit environmental factors, so they're approaching through empty space. They know we can coordinate mixed species attacks, so they're maintaining formations that can respond to multiple threat vectors simultaneously. They're anticipating us, Vextari added grimly. Whatever advantages we gained from unconventional tactics, they've had 6 months to develop counters. Zara felt the familiar weight of impossible expectations settling on her shoulders. The entire Union was depending on her to find a way to stop an enemy that had learned to counter everything they'd thrown at it. But as she looked around the bridge at her mixed-species crew, she realized something important. The Devourers had learned to counter the Union's tactics. They hadn't learned to counter humanity's greatest strength. "Commander," Admiral Korthak's voice came through the communication system, "Strategic Command is requesting your battle plan. All fleet elements are awaiting orders." Zara activated the fleet-wide communication network. Across thousands of ships representing dozens of species and hundreds of millions of beings, her voice carried with crystal clarity. "All ships, this is Commander Chen. I'm going to tell you something that Strategic Command doesn't want you to know. According to every tactical analysis, every strategic simulation, and every predictive model we have, we're going to lose this battle." The silence that followed was deafening. In the background, she could hear Admiral Korthak frantically trying to override her transmission. "The Devourers outnumber us 4-1. Their ships are more advanced than ours. They've adapted their tactics to counter everything we've learned. By every rational measure, we should surrender now and save ourselves the pain of being destroyed." "Commander," Admiral Korthak's voice cut through the communication channel. "What are you doing?" Zara smiled, remembering a conversation with Dr. Martinez months earlier about human military history. "Admiral, I'm about to demonstrate why the Union needed humans in the first place." She reactivated the fleet-wide channel. "But here's the thing about humans. We've never been very good at rational measures. We evolved from prey animals that learned to hunt predators. We survived ice ages that should have wiped us out. We built civilizations on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years." Across the fleet, crews were beginning to understand what she was saying. Not the words, but the feeling behind them. The same feeling that had driven human explorers to cross vast oceans in wooden boats, human scientists to split atoms with their bare hands, and human soldiers to charge machine gun nests with nothing but courage and determination. The Devourers have spent months learning to counter our tactics, but they made one critical mistake. They assumed that losing was something we'd try to avoid. Zara pulled up the tactical display showing the approaching enemy fleet. "All ships, new battle plan. We're not going to try to outfight them or outmaneuver them. We're going to do something that no rational military force would ever attempt." "Which is?" Admiral Korthak asked, though his tone suggested he was beginning to understand. "We're going to charge them, all of us. Every ship, every squadron, every battle group. We're going to fly straight into the center of their formation and see what happens when an immovable object meets a force that refuses to be stopped." The communication channels erupted as thousands of officers began protesting simultaneously. The plan violated every principle of fleet tactics. It was suicide on a galactic scale. "Commander Chen," General Praxis's voice cut through the chaos, "this is tactically insane." "Yes," Zara agreed cheerfully. "That's exactly the point." She activated her personal command override, something that had been given to her with the understanding that it would never be used except in the most desperate circumstances. "All ships prepare for full-speed assault. Target, the center of the Devourer formation. Time to contact, 37 minutes. "Ma'am," Thane said quietly, "the crew is looking to you for confidence. Are you certain this will work?" Zara looked at her bridge crew. These beings from 5 different species who had learned to trust a human with their lives. "Thane, I have absolutely no idea if this will work, but I know one thing for certain." "What's that?" The Devourers are expecting us to act rationally. They've prepared for every logical response we might make. But humans don't always act logically. Sometimes we act on faith. The fleet began accelerating toward the enemy formation. Thousands of ships, from massive Krathen dreadnoughts to tiny Vex fighters, moved in perfect coordination despite the apparent insanity of their mission. 20 minutes to contact, reported Klikta. Devourer formation is maintaining position. They're not responding to our approach. They're confused, Vexitari observed. Their tactical computers are probably trying to determine what our real strategy is. The idea that we'd simply charge them without a plan doesn't fit their models. That's because their models assume we want to survive, Zara replied. But survival has never been humanity's primary objective. Then what is? Mora asked. Zara thought about her great-grandmother, Elena Chen the Relentless, who had boarded enemy ships knowing she might never return. She thought about her ancestors who had faced impossible odds with nothing but determination and crude weapons. She thought about every human throughout history who had chosen to fight rather than yield, even when fighting meant certain death. Making sure the other guy doesn't. 10 minutes to contact. Devourer ships are beginning to move. They're trying to spread their formation to avoid a concentrated impact. Let them spread, Zara said calmly. All ships prepare for impact. Mixed species boarding parties stand ready. Boarding parties. Admiral Korthak's voice crackled with disbelief. Commander, you can't be serious. Deadly serious, Admiral. The one thing the Devourers haven't prepared for is close-quarters combat aboard their own ships. Their tactics are all based on ship-to-ship warfare. They've never encountered an enemy crazy enough to ram them and fight hand-to-hand in their corridors. Because it's suicide! Maybe. But if we're going to die anyway, let's make sure we take as many of them with us as possible. The first ships reached the Devourer formation, and space erupted into the largest battle in galactic history. But it wasn't the kind of battle anyone had expected. Instead of the careful maneuvering and long-range exchanges typical of fleet actions, it became a brutal close-quarters brawl as Union ships rammed into Devourer vessels and disgorged boarding parties. UGS Retribution reports successful boarding of Devourer vessel designation Alpha 7, came a report from the tactical net. Mixed species teams are fighting through their corridors. UGS Vengeance has rammed Devourer battleship Beta 3. Casualties heavy, but the enemy ship is dead in space. Multiple Devourer ships are attempting to withdraw from close engagement. Our ramming tactics are disrupting their formation integrity. Zara watched the tactical display as chaos spread through the enemy fleet. The Devourers had prepared for every possible strategy except the one being used against them. Their superior numbers and technology meant nothing when Union ships were literally inside their hulls, fighting corridor by corridor. Commander, Vextari reported, we're receiving reports from the boarding parties. The mixed species teams are outperforming single-species groups by a factor of 3 to 1. This wasn't entirely surprising. Each species brought different capabilities to close-quarters combat. Human adaptability and determination, Krathen strength and resilience, Seraphim speed and precision, Volothan berserker rage, Vex coordination and sacrifice, Verdani patience, and tactical analysis. Working together, they were proving unstoppable in the confined spaces of enemy ships. Time to target our designated vessel, Zara announced to her bridge crew. Through the main viewer, they could see their objective approaching. A massive Devourer command ship, larger than anything in the Union fleet, bristling with weapons that could destroy planets. They were going to ram it. All hands, prepare for impact, Thane announced over the ship's intercom. Boarding parties to assault positions. Zara strapped herself into her command chair and activated her personal combat systems. She wasn't going to coordinate this battle from the bridge. She was going to lead it from the front. Ma'am, Mora said quietly, the probability of survival for this action is essentially 0. Probably, Zara agreed. But that's never stopped humans before. The UGS Prometheus struck the Devourer command ship like a spear thrown by an angry god. The impact sent shockwaves through both vessels, but the Union ship's reinforced hull held together just long enough for the boarding tubes to deploy. "Go! Go! Go!" Zara shouted, leading the first wave of boarders into the alien corridors. The interior of the Devourer ship was unlike anything in Union databases. Organic-looking passages that seemed to pulse with their own life, lighting that shifted through spectrums beyond normal vision, and an atmosphere that felt charged with hostile energy. But the enemy crew was even more alien than their ship. The Devourers weren't the mindless consumers that Union propaganda had depicted. They were intelligent, organized, and utterly ruthless. They also weren't prepared for the mixed species assault teams that came pouring through their hull. Zara found herself fighting alongside Thane, whose Volathan strength allowed him to tear through enemy defenders like paper. Beside him, Vexitari moved with liquid grace, her seraphim speed making her nearly untouchable. Klikta coordinated with the other Vex boarders to establish overlapping fields of fire, while Mora provided tactical analysis and anticipated enemy movements. But it was the human element that made the difference. When Thane's berserker rage would have sent him charging into an obvious trap, Zara's tactical awareness kept him alive. When Vexitari's precision would have led to overthinking a rapidly changing situation, human adaptability provided instant responses. When Klikta's hive mind tendencies would have made her predictable, human creativity introduced variables the enemy couldn't anticipate. "Bridge is 2 levels up," Mora reported, her photosynthetic patches glowing as she interfaced with the ship's organic computer systems. "But there's something wrong with their command structure." "What do you mean?" Zara asked, using her plasma rifle to clear a path through the corridor. "The Devourers aren't coordinating properly. They're fighting as individuals rather than as a unified force. It's like their command network is fragmenting." Zara's tactical mind seized on this information. If the Devourers were losing coordination, it meant their greatest advantage was breaking down. "Klikta, can you interface with their command network?" "Attempting integration now," the Vex replied, her cybernetic implants sparking as they made contact with the alien systems. "Zara, this is extraordinary. The Devourer ships aren't crewed by separate beings. They're all part of a single vast organism." "A hive mind?" Thane asked, his tusks gleaming as he fought. "More than that. A single consciousness distributed across their entire fleet. But the ramming attacks have damaged the connection between ships. They're becoming isolated, confused." Understanding crashed over Zara like a physical blow. The Devourers weren't just an alien species with advanced technology. They were a single entity, possibly the size of a galaxy, that had somehow achieved faster-than-light consciousness. But that consciousness required intact communication networks to function. "All teams, new priority," she announced over the tactical net. "Forget the bridges. Target the communication arrays. We need to isolate as many ships as possible from their network." The battle that followed was unlike anything in military history. Union forces, designed and trained for ship-to-ship combat, found themselves conducting a form of warfare that was part boarding action, part neurosurgery. They weren't trying to capture enemy vessels. They were trying to lobotomize a galactic-scale intelligence. UGS Defiance reports successful severing of communication network on Devourer Vessel Gamma 9. Enemy resistance has ceased completely. UGS Courage has isolated 3 enemy ships from their network. They're dead in space. Multiple Devourer vessels are attempting to withdraw. It appears they're prioritizing maintaining network connectivity over tactical advantage. As the battle progressed, it became clear that the Union forces had stumbled onto something unprecedented. The Devourers, for all their technological superiority, had a fatal weakness. They were utterly dependent on their networked consciousness. Isolated ships became helpless, their crews unable to function without the guidance of the greater intelligence. Commander, Admiral Korthak's voice came through the communication system. Preliminary reports suggest we've destroyed or isolated over 60% of the Devourer fleet. This is beyond our most optimistic projections. But Zara wasn't celebrating yet. On the bridge of the Devourer command ship, she stood before what appeared to be the central communication hub for the entire invasion fleet. It was a massive organic structure, pulsing with energy and connected to similar structures throughout the ship. Klikta, can you interface with this? The Vex approached the alien console cautiously. The data flow is enormous. This single ship is coordinating thousands of vessels across multiple star systems. Can you disrupt it? Yes, but Zara, if I sever this connection, I'll be cutting off a significant portion of the Devourer consciousness from the main body. The feedback could be catastrophic. For them or for us. Both. Zara looked around the bridge at her mixed-species team. They had fought their way through impossible odds to reach this moment. The fate of the galaxy hung on a decision that had to be made in the next few seconds. Do it! Klikta's cybernetic systems interfaced with the Devourer hub, and the results were immediate. Across the battle space, enemy ships began going dark as their connection to the central intelligence was severed. Some exploded as their organic systems went into catastrophic failure. Others simply stopped moving, their crews reduced to mindless automatons. But the feedback was devastating. Klikta screamed as alien data flooded through her neural pathways, threatening to burn out her consciousness entirely. Zara grabbed her, trying to provide some form of anchor to her own identity. "Hold on," she whispered. "Remember who you are. Remember your hive. Don't let it consume you." For a moment that stretched into eternity, they were connected not just to each other, but to the vast intelligence they were fighting. Zara felt the Devourer consciousness touching her mind, and she understood for the first time what they were truly facing. It wasn't evil. It wasn't even malevolent in any sense she could comprehend. It was hungry, not for food or resources, but for experience, for consciousness itself. It consumed entire civilizations not out of cruelty, but because it needed their perspectives, their ways of thinking, their accumulated knowledge and culture. But in that moment of contact, the Devourer intelligence experienced something it had never encountered before. It touched Zara's mind and found something that refused to be absorbed. A consciousness that became more resilient the more pressure was applied to it. A way of thinking that thrived on impossible odds and found strength in desperation. It found humanity. The alien intelligence recoiled from the contact, not in fear but in confusion. It had consumed thousands of species across millions of years, but it had never encountered a consciousness that became more dangerous when threatened with extinction. The connection severed abruptly, leaving Klikta unconscious but alive, and Zara staring at a now dead alien console. "Status report," she called out weakly. "The Devourer fleet is in full retreat," Vextari reported from the tactical station. "Approximately 30% of their vessels have been destroyed or abandoned. The remainder are withdrawing beyond the galactic rim." Zara sank into the alien command chair, exhaustion washing over her like a physical weight. They had won, but she understood now that this was only the beginning. The Devourer intelligence was vast beyond imagination, and they had only faced a small portion of its full attention. But they had proven something important. Humanity's greatest weakness, their tendency to act irrationally when faced with impossible odds, was also their greatest strength. They were the one species in the galaxy that became more dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. "Commander!" Admiral Korthak's voice came through the communication system. "Congratulations on a brilliant victory. Strategic Command is requesting a full debrief on your tactics." Zara smiled grimly. "Admiral, tell Strategic Command that human tactics can't be taught from a manual. They can only be learned through experience. And the most important lesson is this. When faced with an impossible situation, the rational response is usually the wrong response. And the right response? Do something so crazy that even you think it's insane. Then do it with absolute commitment and see what happens. As the Union fleet began rescue operations and damage assessment, Zara stood on the bridge of the captured Devourer command ship, looking out at the stars. They had won this battle, but she knew the war was far from over. The Devourer intelligence would adapt, would learn, would return with new tactics and strategies. But she also knew that humanity would be ready. Because humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning one critical lesson. It doesn't matter how big the enemy is, how advanced their technology, or how impossible the odds. What matters is your willingness to keep fighting when everyone else has given up. And humans never gave up. Months later, back at the Academy on Nexus Prime, Zara stood before a new class of mixed-species cadets. The curriculum had been completely redesigned, incorporating human military history and tactical philosophy alongside traditional galactic doctrine. "Who can tell me," she asked the assembled students, "the most important principle of human warfare?" A young Krathan cadet raised his hand. "Superior firepower, sir?" "Wrong." A Seraphim cadet tried next. "Tactical surprise?" "Wrong again." The class fell silent until a small human cadet in the back row raised her hand tentatively. "Yes, Cadet Morrison?" "Never surrender?" Zara smiled. "Close, but not quite. The most important principle of human warfare is this. When faced with an impossible situation, the correct response is to change the definition of impossible." She pulled up a tactical display showing the Battle of the Solaran system. The Devourers thought they understood the parameters of the engagement. They had superior numbers, better technology, and tactical advantages. According to every rational analysis, they should have won. The cadets leaned forward, hanging on every word. "But humans don't fight rational wars. We fight emotional wars. We fight with desperation and determination and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough to change the course of history." As the class ended and the cadets filed out, chattering excitedly about the lesson, Zara remained behind, looking out at the stars through the Academy's observation windows. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the galaxy, the Devourer intelligence was regrouping, adapting, preparing for the next engagement. It had learned that humanity was dangerous when desperate. But Zara knew something the Devourers didn't. Humans weren't just dangerous when desperate. They were divine. And the next time the two forces met, the galaxy would witness the birth of something unprecedented. A species that had evolved beyond the need for hope because they had learned to create their own miracles through sheer stubborn determination. The war was far from over. But for the first time in galactic history, the prey had become the hunter. And the hunt was just beginning.